primary motivations behind Reagan and the NSC's decision to carry out the Iran-Contra deals were improving U.S. relations with the countries involved, increasing U.S. influence in the Middle East and Central America, and the threat of the expansion of communist power. The United States started to become a problematic force in the Middle East in 1963 during the White Revolution, when a U.S.-backed Iranian Shah implemented many traditionally Western reforms. On January 16, 1979, after a 16-year reign, the Shah was exiled from Iran and tense relations with the United States began. Around the same time, college students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took 52 American employees hostage. This was the origin of the infamous Iran hostage crisis, a 444-day-long crisis that eventually led to the end of diplomatic relations with Iran on April 4, 1980. However, this was only one of the many downfalls of the U.S. meddling in the affairs of other countries. The Contras, anti-communists rebelling against the Sandinistas, a leftist socialist government in Nicaragua, was another U.S. failure. The Contras consisted of 5 main groups with varying motivations, plus U.S. officials, most notably the notorious and violent former Somoza National Guard, who were forced to flee to Honduras after the revolution and wanted revenge. U.S. support to the Contras began in the early 1980s with financial and military aid. By 1984, popular support within the U.S. for the Contras had died. Regardless, the president and the men he tasked with helping him continued to support the Contras and garnered support from other countries. The president at the time was Ronald Reagan. His political career took off in 1962 when he announced he was a Republican. In 1980, he easily won the Republican nomination and chose George Bush as his running mate. In 1981, Reagan became the 40th president of the United States. His policies are credited with helping to topple Soviet communism. He was also called the Teflon president because everything, from small affairs to international scandals, just slid off his back. One of these was the Iran-Contra scandal. The Iran-Contra affair was a 1980s political scandal involving illegal arms trades and the diversion of government funds. The affair was kickstarted in 1979 when Iran and Nicaragua both underwent regime changes, neither of which were beneficial to the United States. Instead, both changes threatened it. Then, in 1984, Shiite terrorists took 7 American hostages from the CIA headquarters in Beirut, Lebanon. Each hostage was held separately by unknown parties presumably linked to Iran and scattered across civil war in Lebanon. In 1985, a group of Israelis came forward with a plan to sell U.S.-made weapons to Iran on behalf of the U.S., and in return, Iran would pay for the weapons and release the American hostages. The deal had multiple goals, primarily to improve U.S. relations with Iran, which would in turn improve relations with Lebanon, increase influence in the Middle East, and acquire the release of the hostages. Reagan signed off on the deal while somehow convincing himself that he was not negotiating with terrorists. Around that time, Oliver North came up with a plan to overcharge Iran for the weapons and used the $12 million profit to fund the Contras. He then wrote the diversion memo, a letter to Reagan and Poindexter detailing the scheme. Reagan and Poindexter approved it. For Reagan, his motivations were largely personal sympathies. The diversion of funds did not affect the continuation of the arms sales. In total, 2,000 missiles were sold or transferred to Iran, and $12 million illegally funded the Contras. With most scandals, discovery was inevitable. In November 1986, a Lebanese newspaper, Al Shira, published an article exposing the arms trades. Reagan went on national television to deny all allegations. However, a week later, he returned to confirm the existence of the weapon sales, but denied that it was an arms for hostages situation. In January of 1987, the Senate and the House both created committees to investigate the scandal. From early May to early August, the 2 committees held televised joint hearings that became known as the Iran-Contra hearings. The final report of their findings consisted of 5 main things. The NSC raised money for the Contras after the Boland Amendments were passed, and therefore illegally. They created an organization to sell the Contras arms. They tried to ransom hostages. They sold arms to Iran. Money was diverted from the arms sale to the Contras, and all of this was supposedly done without presidential authorization. 14 people were charged with operational or cover-up crimes. However, no one ended up serving any jail time as a result of the scandal. But even today, people still question how the president and his advisors could do something so illicit and reckless. The Iran-Contra affair illustrated the temptations that people in power have to carry out immoral actions. It must be held responsible for at least part of the lack of the U.S. government's credibility, an issue that still plagues the nation today. Unfortunately, the leaders of the U.S. have yet to learn their lesson as they continue to meddle in foreign affairs, raising already high tensions to concerning levels.